Well, we're getting closer and closer to the Republican convention, and as I've followed it, I've realized that I know very little about how the convention actually works. Since this year promises to be the most ambiguous convention in a long time, I decided to do some research to see how things might shake out. First of all, let's look at how a normal convention works. The primary or caucus process is pretty clear to most people since that's the part we have a hand in. At a primary, the voter votes for delegates who support their chosen candidate. The amount of delegates and how they're allotted varies on a state-by-state basis. In general, delegates are allotted either proportionally or wholly to the winner. It gets complicated from there, but you can do research for your own state by visiting some of the sites I've provided below. Once the delegates have been selected, they then go to the convention. This year, it's July 18th through the 21st in Cleveland, and there they will select the presidential nominee. Whoever gets 1,237 delegates, which is half of the total delegates plus one, will win the Republican nomination and move on to the general election. The fun part, and I use the term fun loosely, comes if no candidate is able to obtain 1,237 delegates. If, after the first ballot at the convention, no candidate has the majority of delegates' votes, the convention is considered brokered, meaning that all regular delegate votes are released. Rules vary again here, and I'll explain those more in a minute, but most delegates have pledged their votes to a particular candidate prior to the convention, and when the convention is brokered, they're no longer required to vote for the candidate they pledged to previously. There is then a second vote where it is hoped that when the delegates are able to change their votes, one of the candidates is able to get a clear majority. There is a rule in the books for this year's convention called Rule 40A. Catchy name, huh? It complicates the process a little bit for the layman. Basically, this rule states that on the first vote, delegates from all states, except a few, have to vote for the candidate that they previously pledged allegiance to, as I explained before. On the second ballot, 55% of a state's delegates are free to vote for whoever they want. If it goes to a third ballot, 85% can change their vote. So now that we know how a brokered convention will work, let's get to how this applies to 2016 and how I think this will all pan out. So far, Donald Trump has 736 delegates. Cruz has 463, and Kasich has 143. Rubio, who has not released his delegates, has 171. In order to avoid a brokered convention, Trump will need 501 more delegates, Cruz 774, and Kasich 1,094. There are still 943 delegates up for grabs, so it's clear that Kasich has no chance, and we'll write him off for now. Speculation shows that Trump would need to win at least New York or California and quite a few other states in order to get the necessary amount of delegates to avoid a brokered convention. We'll get to my thoughts on that in a minute. But California is a really pivotal state here since it's a winner-take-all and it boasts an imposing 172 delegates. Whoever wins there will have a serious lead in the count. So as nice as this all sounds, here's why I don't think this is going to be a squeaky clean race to the finish. Trump is the clear leader right now, but he's been putting his foot in his mouth quite a lot lately, and his polling numbers don't look as good as they used to. I don't think polls are necessarily the most trustworthy predictors, but they're all we have at this point, so we'll look at them anyway. If these numbers are to tell us anything, I imagine that if things continue to go the way they are, we'll be seeing a very messy convention come July. It's all about who ends up being a delegate at the convention and where their personal allegiances lie. The state is who selects the delegates, and many states have proven in the past that they're willing to appoint delegates who don't necessarily support the candidate they've pledged to. This is important when the convention is brokered and those delegates become free to change their vote in a second or third ballot. If a delegate who is pledged to Trump actually supports Cruz, as I can imagine at least a few of them do, and the convention is brokered, it is highly likely that their vote will change come a second ballot. This is what will stop the Trump train. My prediction is that we will see a brokered convention and we will see an establishment Republican walk away with the nomination after a second or third vote. This is because the establishment is who runs the convention. They choose the candidate. In fact, it's amazing that Trump has even gotten this far. But he won't make it through a brokered convention, and he knows that. That's why he's threatened that his supporters will riot if things don't go his way.
I think we'll win before getting to the convention, but I can tell you if we didn't, and if we're 20 votes short, or if we're 100 short, and we're at 1,100 and somebody else is at 500 or 400, because we're way ahead of everybody. I don't think you can say that we don't get it automatically. I think you'd have riots.
I believe we'll see a lot more panic and a lot more antics from the Trump camp before the convention, but I don't imagine that it's going to make a lot of difference. At this point, no one's going to change their vote. Donald Trump isn't going to win over the establishment supporters, and Cruz isn't going to win over those on the Trump train. I don't know what's to come. I've heard speculation that the Republicans might try to bring out someone else at the last minute. I've heard people say Rubio might come back. Who knows? But I'm fairly convinced that we'll see a brokered convention and an establishment win, whether or not that's what the country voted for. The anti-establishment movement has a long way to go before it can beat said establishment, and I don't see it happening this year. But the movement itself has to be acknowledged. There is a growing disdain for our current government, and I don't think that's going away, even if Trump loses. And that's a good thing. We need to shake up Washington, and although I don't necessarily agree with Trump, I'm fully behind the movement to break down the establishment and get a real representative of the population in office. As always, thanks so much for watching. As you probably noticed, I got a new microphone today. I threw my other one out after the last video because I just couldn't take it anymore. Obviously, this isn't a top-of-the-line mic, and I'd love to get something better, but we'll start with baby steps. I'm looking forward to making more videos with better audio in the future, and I thank you all for your support and remind you to subscribe if you like my videos. Please also feel free to share this with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Thanks a lot!